Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine.
Jimmy Kimmel's a loser. I do Jimmy Kimmel. I did him a lot. Yeah. And he'd be standing on the sidewalk. Oh, sir, may I bring you in? He'd bring me in every time. The whole show is talking bad about Trump.
He called us doofuses when we had you on.
He's a group of doofuses in flat-brimmed hats.
Guess what? We
ask
did
him how many.
What he did.
Ask him. Yeah, you do bigger. Yeah, you do. He shows.
Jimmy Kimmel just got blindsided by a $500 million, 0-cents lawsuit from Donald Trump, and Greg Gutfeld is spinning the courtroom circus into comedy gold. In a blistering roast that leaves no ego unbruised, Gutfeld tears down Kimmel's smug late-night persona with razor-sharp wit and biting irony. This isn't just a takedown, it's a televised reckoning. If you thought Kimmel was untouchable, think again. This isn't mere satire. It's Gutfeld delivering the most satisfying roast Hollywood never saw coming.
It's incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then...
Remember the Academy Awards, I said how he's the worst host in the history of the Academy Awards, and this stupid guy goes up, and just before the Best Picture of the Year, the show is almost over. They're waiting for the Best Picture of the Year. He gets up, and he says, and his wife said, please don't do it. Please, darling, don't go out. His manager said, don't do it. I have to do it. He goes out and reads my truth to the entire audience right before the prime time, the Best Picture. And it said, basically, he is the worst host of the history. He reads the whole thing. And then I think he said something like, ha, 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 he thinks he bothers me, or some crap like that. I said, he's one of the dumbest human beings ever. He should have listened to his wife.
Greg Gutfeld didn't just roast Jimmy Kimmel, he flambeed him with a torch built from punchlines, sarcasm, and the kind of comedic timing that should come with a seatbelt warning. And after Donald Trump dropped a $500 million lawsuit on Kimmel, the late-night hack found himself caught in both a legal hurricane and the path of a Gutfeld monologue that hit harder than Kimmel's ratings have been falling.
And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him, and guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
Oh. You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song.
The show kicked off like a firecracker. Gutfeld strolled in, grinning like a guy who knew Christmas had come early. Except this time, the present was a $500 million legal bombshell landing on Kimmel's desk. And let's face it, tiff irony. Where currency, Jimmy would owe more than the entire state of California. So there was Gutfeld, standing before the crowd, eyes dancing with mischief, like a kid who just watched the class clown get sent to the principal's office.
A review, and has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less-than-average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed-up but cheap ABC talent, George Slopanopoulos.
Except in this case, the class clown was Jimmy Kimmel, and the principal was a judge holding a $500 million invoice. You could practically hear the joy in Gutfeld's voice as he dove into the moment. He painted Jimmy as a man who spent years acting like an armchair psychologist, amateur moralist, and bargain bin comedian, all rolled into one.
The killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had a penis.
A man who somehow thinks he's fighting for truth while hiding behind cue cards written by interns who still think TikTok is journalism. Gutfeld didn't just pull back the curtain, he torched it. He dove right into the heart of Kimmel's identity crisis. Once a mildly funny guy in a suit, now reduced to a bitter spokesperson for the Church of Sanctimonious Late Night. And now, with Trump filing a $500 million 0-cents lawsuit, Jimmy's moral compass has the strength of a paper straw in a hurricane.
Jimmy's career peaked with busty girls on trampolines. Now the only boob we see is him. He once co-hosted The Man Show. Now he's sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual cycle. Here's another morose multimillionaire. Hey there.
Gutfeld dismantled the illusion, pointing out how Jimmy evolved from jester to judge, jury, and executioner only to be legally bodied by the very man he built a career mocking. Then Gutfeld did what he does best, he cranked up the irony. He reveled in how Kimmel, a guy who loves policing, misinformation, and power abuse, was suddenly on trial himself. It was like watching a cat get sprayed with its own water bottle. The guy who turned late-night TV into a therapy session for liberal guilt was learning the hard way that accountability runs both ways, and Jimmy forgot his seatbelt.
I wonder who he thinks the people at fault are.
The people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. The Democratic Party let that disaster happen. That is not a media failure. That is a Democratic Party failure. And only right-wing manufactured outrage who claims the media and the Democratic Party work as one have fused it into this.
Oh, I have a few names to add. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, the town crier.
Gutfeld took a swipe at Kimmel's audience too, not the ones watching for laughs, but the self-congratulatory clapping seals who applaud anything remotely anti-Trump. He described them as a smug support group, meeting nightly to have their Twitter feeds validated by a man in a suit. And now, with Kimmel facing a lawsuit, that same crowd nervously checks their phones for updates, wondering if their nightly affirmation dealer is going under. Then came the part where Gutfeld couldn't resist dredging up Kimmel's past. He sliced into Jimmy's Man Show days like a butcher with a cleaver, reminding everyone that the guy now moralizing America once treated bikini contests as primetime entertainment. He painted a vivid picture of Jimmy's panic behind the scenes, through legal documents, calling lawyers with quinoa in his mouth, wondering if sarcasm counts as evidence, maybe even Googling whether crying on TV could be a legal defense.
Rex, because they believe the media. And yet, we're fine, because we weren't brainwashed. We know the media's job is to lie, to create anxiety out of proportion to the actual threat, or no threat at all. Journalists really only need to give you one tip to manage stress, and that's stop paying attention to journalists.
That image had the audience in stitches because the downfall of a sanctimonious celebrity writes itself. Gutfeld just turned it into music. Then he fast-forwarded the story imagining Kimmel's day in court. There he stands, no desk, no laugh. Track, no applause, just Jimmy, exposed like an old rerun nobody asked for. Gutfeld wondered if Jimmy might try cracking a joke, only to realize that courtrooms don't come with sound effects. Because when you remove the cameras and the clapping, what remains is a man who thought he was above it all until Trump showed up with a $500 million sledgehammer. Gutfeld grinned, predicting the media spin comparing it to a soap opera, where every plot twist somehow ends with blame Trump, even when it's Kimmel who tripped on his own punchline.
Still watching Kimmel cry.
One of his tears fell out. Hold on. It's funny how this derangement's working, because it only seems to work if you have a camera in front of you.
Then, like a chef who knows the stew's just right, Gutfeld seasoned the roast with mock sympathy. He playfully worried about Jimmy's finances, suggesting he might have to downgrade from his Malibu mansion to, heaven forbid, a regular one, maybe even get a roommate. Perhaps Stephen Colbert, who's probably next in line for a Trump lawsuit if the jokes keep flowing like boxed wine at a faculty mixer. He joked that Jimmy might have to crowdfund his defense, saying Kimmel's loyal fans would likely send support in the form of angry tweets, vegan muffins, or NFTs of him crying. Gutfeld circled back to what made it all so delicious. It wasn't Just a lawsuit hit was a reckoning, a public moment of oyer, not actually above it all. It was karma in a red tie, wielding a court summons. The guy who spent years preaching to the choir just discovered that sometimes the choir sues you.
He is ripe for mockery and ridicule and even gentle humor if you like him. I mean, just Hunter Biden alone, just in the recent stuff, I mean, you could go on forever. But Kimmel has abdicated his role of a comedian. He's now just a political hack. Which I'm grateful for, because then I get the turf to myself. I'm not a comedian, but I just filled the gap. That's why I'm beating him every night, because he sat there with that guy and basically he spoon-fed him like he was a dementia patient at a
Gutfeld speculated what might happen if Jimmy tried playing the victim, the inevitable waterworks, trembling voice, teary-eyed plea for decency. But Gutfeld waved it all away. No amount of crocodile tears could wash away years of smug superiority. Dressed up in laugh tracks, America had watched as Kimmel played moral referee. But now he's in the game and the scoreboard looks brutal. Then came the knockout. Gutfeld wondered what it must feel like for Kimmel to realize that Trump is the main character of his career. The man who lived rent-free in Jimmy's head just served him an eviction notice, one with a price tag big enough to bankrupt a small country. And if Gutfeld savored anything, it was that realization that Jimmy Kimmel's entire comedy brand had been hijacked by the very man he claimed to loathe.
Tonight was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times
that no matter how many jokes he told, he was never running the show. Trump was, always has been, always will be, and now with a signature and a lawsuit, Trump reminded Jimmy who truly runs the ratings. Even in court, Gutfeld wrapped it all up like a magician finishing his final act. He didn't gloat, he annihilated, he held up a mirror to Hollywood exposing hypocrisy, fake virtue, and ego-filled activism, collapsing it all under the weight of a $500 million lawsuit. And Jimmy, he wasn't just roasted, he was cooked, medium rare, served on a silver platter of irony, with legal documents on the side and poetic justice for garnish. As the crowd roared, Gutfeld arched a brow and nodded like a chef admiring the meal he just served. Comedy isn't immune from consequences. And if you build your legacy on mockery, don't be shocked when the punchline punches back. Gutfeld didn't just roast Kimmel, he buried him in a legal punchline that had America howling.
I don't want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were changing the channel. And that's your 7 jokes.
And somewhere in a quiet Malibu living room filled with anxiety and lavender candles, Jimmy Kimmel was probably rehearsing his next monologue. Not in front of a mirror, but maybe in front of a lawyer. Because for Jimmy, this wasn't just a lawsuit hit, was a soul check. It was that public slap that jolts you from delusion and makes you count how many bad jokes it took to end up here. And Gutfeld leaned into that idea like a man savoring every awkward, poetic frame. He imagined Jimmy sitting alone, scrolling through his own monologues, realizing maybe he confused applause for relevance and moral posturing for substance. Then Gutfeld went even further, imagining Jimmy's next episode if it happens, the awkward swing at humor. And just like that, Gutfeld stepped back, letting the silence linger, because nothing cuts deeper than truth wrapped in a smirk. And when the smirk belongs to Gutfeld, you know the roast isn't over. It's just getting started.